Yeah, no. So thanks again for giving the time to come on. As you've seen in our show, we've had a couple of your colleagues already in the past. Obviously, Aaron, and then Ernest as well, twice already, I think. And then Brian, we did a whole documentary. I flew over to Carro, Indonesia, filmed him going around. And it's happy to have another member of the management team to get another perspective on the company. I think it was just 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago when I reached out and then we were able to set this up. And I think it was really because of that LinkedIn post that I saw, because I had just come from an AI event that I was doing with some of our other portfolio companies. So it's just like fresh in my mind. And then I saw your post, I saw the Google Cloud post, and then you reposted it. And so wow, it's like, oh, there's somebody I can talk to who's actually gone through this whole journey. That's not just, oh, I just started using Gen AI last month, but it's actually you've had like several years already of experimenting and failing and all these things. I think would be interesting to hear on the show. So I thought we'd just start off by maybe giving some context as to like how you even ended up pushing this initiative within Carro. Maybe first just starting off like how you joined Carro, how you found out about a company. You've been in several tech companies prior, but yeah, what was that journey like joining Carro to begin with?
Sure. Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure that I can be here with you as well. As you mentioned, many of my colleagues were before on this podcast with you, right? I don't tend to post much on LinkedIn, right? But I think quite a number of things has been done in the last 1 year in terms of solutions being rolled out in productions. And Google Cloud wanted to work with us to showcase our these solutions. That's why I posted the article 2 weeks ago, right? I think that's what you have picked up. Happy to share, right, from an operator's perspective, how we build our Gen AI journey from ground up. We are not trying to build AI for AI's sake. We are really trying to get business value out of it. It stems from my role because I'm in charge of the operations and all the processes. It's really about how do we streamline our people, our processes, and then using Gen AI to facilitate all of that happening. As you mentioned, thanks for that very quick blip. Before coming to Carro, I actually spent more than 10 years in internet companies. In fact, I started my own company about 15 years ago.
Still mobile first technology.
Correct.
Kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it was back when Android just released, right? In fact, I developed the first Android geolocation app for Singapore, right? That was in 2008, December. I ran that mobile payment company, and subsequent to that, I went to PayPal and then Alipay, right? During which I was running quite a number of the regional projects and digital initiatives. And when I was Alipay, actually, I was supporting Paytm and Touch and Go, right? Developing their super app, right? I believe you probably know Paytm is the largest wallet in India and TNG is the largest wallet for Malaysia, right? I was part of that product team that drove that digital transformation, right, for those companies in those markets. So how I joined Carro was actually, I knew Aaron back when I was still running my company, right? Back then, he was with Singtel Innovate, which was also my investor, right? And I'm actually very impressed. Yeah, so I'm actually very impressed with Aaron as a person, right? Because I will interact with him quite frequently because of their relationship. And when I left, I told him that whatever he start in the future, I will be more than happy to put money into it, right? So I actually personally invested in Carro Series A. And by the way, I didn't even know what the company do. So
it didn't even matter.
Yeah, it didn't even matter. It's just betting on Aaron, right? Blind faith, bet on Aaron. And fast forward to 2020, that was, I think, at the height of COVID, right? Aaron and I, we met up, we caught up again. He told me he needed someone to help him at Carro. And given that I spent probably 7-8 years already in the corporate world, I want to go back to the startup, right? So I just signed up and joined Carro.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting journey. Typically, people join like big tech before they start their own company, but the reverse. And I love the whole story about him investing in your company and then you eventually also investing in Carro early on. And you did mention, obviously, you're in the COO role, and I really like the PPT kind of, it really sums up what you do in a really concrete way as well. But maybe you can take us on this journey because you've been with Carro since 2020. It's already 5 years now.
When I joined, it was 2021.
Oh, 2021. So yeah, still quite some time for startup years, so to speak. So there's definitely a lot that you've seen and shaped within the company. Maybe you can bring us through that journey a little bit. I think prior to this call, you've mentioned splitting that journey into 2 parts, right? I think the first was really about, as you worded, cleaning house. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit more.
I probably also put it into context about what how all of this led to the Gen AI conversation, why we have Gen AI and all that. When I first joined the company, it was really about cleaning house and digital transformation. We had a lot of systems and tools in Carro, right? We have no lack of systems and tools. We have our own in-house ERP. We have our own CRM. I think Brian, whom you have met previously, built the AI pricing as well as the Inspect app that we have. But truth to be told, there's still many gaps in the workflow, right? And what happens is that the ground staff were using Google Sheet and Excel to plug in all the various flows. And as a result, as you can tell, the inputs into the system, whether it's an ERP or a CRM and whatnot, right? In a way, you can say it's garbage in, garbage out. I still remember I had to do a lot of reconciliation because we have to do analysis and reports. And it was pretty much a nightmare. A single analysis will just take me for weeks because I probably have to reconcile between 4 or 5 different sheets, right? And do data cleaning across. And data definitions across all our various business lines is very different, right? Understanding, what's revenue in Malaysia, what's revenue in Singapore, revenue in insurance, what's revenue in financing, and all of that makes data processes very complicated, right? I still remember back then, every country actually, they spend at least 1 day a week just to generate PowerPoint slides. So it's super unproductive and you can tell the number runs, right? So it's not the best use of everybody's time. Hence, my first priority was really to clean house, making sure that we move all the workflows into the ERP, move into the CRM. We standardize the whole entire reporting across the whole entire group with governed data definition framework. Things like we talked about just now, right? Revenue with comms, revenue without comms, what is considered as COGS, what's considered as OPEX, all these things are properly defined, right? There's no changing in definition. So that took quite a while. As you can tell, in Carro, back then, we only operate in 4 markets. But even within 4 markets, we still have our leasing business, we have our car marketplace business, which is split into wholesale. We also have our financing business and after sales business and insurance business. So as a company, we have a big ecosystem.
Complex.
Yeah, that creates a lot of complexity in reporting.
Yeah.
This whole entire transformation took us about 2 years. It was BU by BU, country by country. Today, I can just go to my dashboard, any dashboard, get multiple detailed slices of the inventory cohort profitability, right? I can tell which salesman in which branch, in which region, in say Malaysia, right? What is their productivity, right? And how their activities affect conversion rates. So that sets a stage for us to now leverage on this data, pump into Gen AI, in which we would then automate parts of our workflows as well as our alerts, right? Because we have cleaned out our data structure, we have built semantic mapping across all our metrics and dashboard.
Data is really the foundation for any kind of AI adoption. 2 years, clean house, really addressed like the complexity of the data and granularity as well. What was next after that? What was the second part?
So actually, at the end of my first year, roughly about my end of my first year with Carro, right, I was pretty much being tasked to go and turn around one of our biggest BU to make sure that we turn around the business. I was still in the midst of doing digital transformation, aligning all the stars, making sure every policy definition, like, I need to go and fix this BU. But what's great was that actually what this does was giving me a proof point that what we do in digital transformation can actually bring business results, right? Because I think for a lot of organizations, they struggle to do that because they couldn't see what's the purpose of actually doing data cleaning. What's the purpose of having a well-governed data structure? The CIOs of the world will say that it's important, but at the end of the day, it's about business priorities that takes precedence, right? Pretty much, you can say that it is an interesting moment for me to take this and run at the same time, right? Trying to run both digital transformation and rebuilding the business. It was really about going into every single BU, or rather I would say department within that BU, right? Looking at redefining people's roles and responsibilities, as well as the process, right? I mentioned earlier just now PPT, right? Actually, ideally speaking, I would always love to start with the P, the first P, which is people, right? It is about making sure that we have the right people in place. They know what they're supposed to do. They know what are the KPIs they need to deliver. And then subsequently, solve the process problem. Make sure that departments can work with each other. The SOPs are clear. proper, clear definition of role and responsibilities, right? So that you know who is supposed to hand off to the next person in each of the next step. So with that, it took us 1 or 2 months to go and figure all this out. And I think within a month, we were already able to track the performance of every salesman. This going back to the earlier part about productivity and tracking, right? So with that, we were able to track every salesman's performance. And then from there, we know how to manage each of their performance, the branch performance, and take immediate actions. This allows us to make informed decisions faster and more timely. And this is actually very critical for a company like Carro, because to also give you a sense, right? While I think we talk about a lot about AI, we talk a lot about our retail experience, the transparency of us in terms of delivering a good car ownership experience. The net of this business, or the crux of this business, actually resides within supply chain management. How efficient am I in terms of procuring the right cars at the right price, managing these cars throughout this process, whether is it in terms of the logistics, the maintenance, the reconditioning, and carry all the way to selling, making sure we are able to sell the car as fast as possible. And the more effective we are able to run this business, whether is it from a time or cost perspective, the bigger the advantage we have in terms of going to the market to procure cars. Because we can only tell what we buy. The analogy,
the car turnaround within the ecosystem, yeah.
Exactly. So as I always like to say, we are not in the business of selling one product a million times. We're in the business of selling 1 million product one time, right? Because each car, okay, maybe not one time, maximum 2 or 3, like in the whole entire lifetime of a car, right? Yeah. But you get the point. The idea is, how do we best manage all these cars? And again, this also drives back to the point of Gen AI, because at any point of time in Carro, we have tens of thousands of cars, whether is it on our leasing books or in our marketplace books, not counting even the cars that we have that's parking in our yards for auction, like the repo cars for auction that were owned by the banks. How do we best manage these cars in the most timely and most economic methods possible so that we can derive maximum value, right? It becomes a very big topic, and obviously it is not something that you can have a human looking through a dashboard and making decisions. That's where Gen AI come in.
I think the part 1, part 2, I think goes to show how you link efficiency in the input metrics with efficiency with the output metrics, like from just improving productivity to how that really impacts the bottom line for the business. And I think that really sets the stage for our discussion on how Gen AI journey for Carro. But before we get into that, I think it would be important for us to also get a sense of what your own views are on Gen AI, right? Because that's shape how you manage the engineers in the team and how you implemented different experiments and solutions.
So maybe to just qualify myself, I have never been an engineer. In fact,
makes it even more interesting.
In fact, the only background I have in programming is introduction to programming, and that was conducted in C.
Okay, I was gonna say C++, even older.
No, not even C++. It's not like oriented language, right?
Yeah.
So basically, it was very interesting when I first built my first Android app, and that was in Java. In fact, I also wrote quite a number of Google Glass applications. But basically, I built my apps using code snippets from Stack Overflow, right? My own superpower is actually knowing how to find the functions and then putting them all together and making them work. So Gen AI actually was pretty much like a dream for me, right? Because basically, instead of me going to search for the code in Stack Overflow, Gen AI can now just give me the code directly. So if Gen AI came in 10 years ago, that would have been a dream for me, because I would have way more. That probably I can share a little bit with you. I think how Gen AI can change certain paradigms in terms of how work will be done in the future, right? Instead of teams of special experts, what we will have and end up with is small teams, and small teams with good cross-domain experience and knowledge, right? Because it is about how do you put together a solution to solve a direct problem that you see on the ground, right? This is not to say Gen AI will do everything for you, but it is a team of cross-domain experts who can see the output of what Gen AI comes out with, process that accordingly with the direct knowledge of the ground, and solve the problem, leading to organization change. So I think that's the first thing, right? Smaller teams, cross-domain knowledge. Second thing, I would also say that I think solution will be more bottom-up in terms of top-down. I think earlier in the conversation, before we were talking about how do you actually measure success metrics of AI projects, right? I think that the bottom-up approach whereby data scientists and engineer, instead of them be leading the charge of the solution, it is to become business partners together with the business owners to make things work on the ground, right? Because the business owner on the ground owns the business. They have full accountability and responsibility to make sure that it does work. At the end of the day, whatever solution that you derive or deliver has to work because it is on the head of the business owner, right? Instead of an engineer or data scientist trying to build something and hopefully that the business actually use. Yeah. So as a result, I think that with Gen AI, we should be looking at how do we empower solutions to be bottom up rather than top down. And the third and last thing, which actually goes into how we do it in Carro, is that instead of trying to build a big swanky project, right? Like for example, trying to build automated agents to talk to all our customers, we are looking at building small tools that can deliver quick wins. Because actually in operations, there's actually many hidden crevices of, how should I put it, unproductivity, right? Not productivity, productivity. Right. And the unproductivity actually creates a bottleneck for your business to fly. I can give you an example, right? In terms of document processing, we want to give our customers the best possible experience in terms of their loan process. When you want to submit your loan for credit approval, someone will need to assess your credit score and determine whether or not I should be giving you the loan, right? Unlike Singapore, many of the countries outside of Singapore, they do not have SingPass. And in this market, a lot of these documents comes in paper forms. So what this would mean is that you literally have armies of people, right? Whether is it Carro or in a bank that does financing, they have armies of people receiving documents on a daily basis, typing everything into the system, and then submitting it to someone else who manually validate it, and then give a credit approval for the application. Instead of trying to build this whole entire mega system, actually all we needed to solve for is that solve for the front part. How can we get the data from document format into a system readable format in JSON so that I could quickly process this document so that the credit team can approve, and I give a near real-time credit approval for my customer that submits, right? And at the end of the day, not only it is a great customer experience because the customer no longer need to wait for days for a credit approval. Two, I don't have to spend so much time trying to do this manual data entry. So in fact, we wrote this out, exactly this function in Carro, right? We actually reduced the loan application time from 40 minutes to 5 minutes, right? So we save 35 minutes per application, right? Instead of looking through 24 pages, 25 pages of documents, entering things in the system, now they just need to spend 5 minutes to review all the documents, and then it gets submitted to the next process. By the way, this solution, we built it in less than a week. It was 1 day to prototype, 5 days just to clean up the UI and things like that, and we shipped it to the customers and as in the end user, right? And they have been using till now. It's a lot of these small tools and quick wins that we derive, which allow us to build a more holistic solution.
I think you've shared kind of these kind of principles that you've taken from your own background, being a kind of a quote-unquote commoner, as you mentioned. And I think while that's very interesting to hear, I think we'll see more and more leaders like yourself who may not have engineering background but are able to build these kind of solutions without a huge engineering team or even without engineers necessarily. How did those kind of principles that formed as a leader translate into the principles of Carro when it came to its own Gen AI journey?
So maybe to give you a very quick 3 points. So when I first started off the journey, that was back in 2023. Right. No, sorry, yeah, back in 2023. Yes, early 2023. Back then, I think that was when ChatGPT first came out. But we were seeing a lot of projects coming up, right? There was a LangChain. For those who are people with us, LangChain, it is a project whereby you can chain multiple prompts together to make it into a workflow. There were also talks about AGI, Super AGI, Baby AGI, AutoGPT. Quite a number of tools came out. So it was very clear to me at that point of time is that if Carro is to invest in Gen AI, we shouldn't be building everything ourselves, right? In fact, we should only build things that's Carro specific, because even if I were to build a tool myself today, this exact same tool will be available 1 week later, and it will be even faster than myself shipping it. So instead of trying to do everything ourselves, we want to leverage the community also to do this. At the same time, build what is Carro specific. To give you some example, when we first started on LangChain, we needed to build a lot of different capabilities together, including things like how do you run calculation on LangChain, how do you do text to speech or speech to text, and also image recognition, because we are dealing with multi-format, multi-model types of conversations within Carro. Is that something the best use of our time? I think that is a no. So hence, instead of building all of that, we shifted in terms of building endpoints such as Carro search endpoints that goes into our ERP, right? Why is that the case? Because at the end of the day, if I want to get a task done, or let's say if I'm a salesman, I want to know that this customer probably can only afford a car, maybe $1,000-$2,000 of installment per month. What kind of cars that Carro have in inventory today that will suit the needs of the customer, right? So we basically build our own tools that serve functions like that. So I could query this, and then the salesman will get 5 or 6 different inventory available and then recommend it to the customer. The second point is that we prioritize building agent windows over big general chatbots. So this is not to say that we didn't build those big general chatbots before, right? We had some company sponsoring us to do it. So okay, since you want to do it for us, why don't you do it? But our realization is at the end of the day, it's nothing more than a glorified FAQ. So the general chatbot, the big general chatbot, the best function you can do is just to repeat whatever information you have in your documents, right? In your policies, in your SOP docs and things like that. But there's a lot of nuances that it will not understand, and all this will be lost in between. Instead of trying to use that and confuse my workforce, we focus on agent window. Easier to deploy, faster for us to fine-tune it and make it more accurate. So some of these examples, just now the example I mentioned, the application automator, that was actually built on our own Zi backend. So we have a simple backend whereby I can create agents. I'll write my prompt into the agents, and then all the user need to do is to upload a document and click a button, and then it returns a JSON result, right, from the document. We have done that for numerous of different things. We have done that for the application forms I mentioned just now. We also done that for even our stand-up meetings. So imagine you have stand-up meetings with our sales team twice a day, morning and evening, right? So how do I govern the team to make sure that all the various customer leads are being taken care of? We have built a meeting summarizer in which they just need to drop the meeting recording into the folder, and automatically we return the key points. Of course, we have to sanitize what are the key points, like how we format the key, and that will automatically be generated on a daily basis. On the conversation of accuracy, what's your alternative? Your alternative is sent to maybe, 10 branches, 10 times 2, 20 recordings a day, 30 minutes per recording. That's probably one full-time person's job. Instead of doing that, now everything is done using RAG, right? Using Gen AI, and I can build workflows subsequent to that. So that's the second part, right? Prioritizing on building agent windows. And the third and last thing is per what I mentioned to you just now. Focus on small and quick wins instead of overly ambitious project. In Carro, I have to tell you, our time works very differently. Our time works very differently. We always wanted everything yesterday. So much so that waiting 1 month always felt like an eternity, right? So instead of trying to scope the project so big and it takes weeks to months to develop, we focus on quick wins and making sure that with these quick wins, each of these quick wins, we can answer to our boss, myself, to Aaron, why I get my engineers to spend 2 hours to solve this problem that we have in this department, because we can count for how much time savings, how much cost efficiency or productivity that we can save. With the rise of agentic workflow, to get to agentic workflow, we need to make sure all these small processes are there, because eventually you need to chain them all up so that one agentic workflow can cover for the whole process end to end. So it is part of the journey anyway. So that's how we went ahead and developed our strategy towards Gen AI.
No, I love that you contextualize the principles within the last three years that you've been exploring Gen AI, from LangChain and targeting specific workflows that could immediately show you like real world and results, to you talked about multimodal models popping up the year after or several months after, and you're now able to like take in more types of input and process that. And now in 2025, what's exciting for you guys in terms of the Gen AI journey? Yeah, you hinted at it a little bit. Maybe you can share a little bit more.
There's a few things that we're working on. I think one thing is agentic workflow, which I mentioned just now. So it is about how do you carry the whole workflow from end to end, right? How do I automate the whole entire process? Let's say, for example, I have a customer who wants to buy a car. Today, to carry this customer all the way from buying, starting the transaction, all the way to payments, to transfer, in between there will probably be 4 or 5 different teams that will be involved, right? Someone processing the transaction document, someone who will be handling the loan application and chasing the banks for disbursement, someone will be responsible for the transferring of the car, someone will be responsible for the logistics. Of course, on the physical world side of things, I cannot do that with AI, right? At least not yet. But do I really need so many people in the process to handle documents? So the thing is about how do we think about and reinvent how the workflow would be in the future, so that the salesman basically has a virtual assistant in front of him to handle all this process for him. Imagine you are a salesman directly in front of a customer, instead of telling the customer, oh, give me a while, let me check with this other colleague in terms of where your loan application is and things like that. On the dashboard, you would be able to immediately see what's the progress, in which stage we are at, and all these are all handled programmatically, right? Because I have an AI agent that's managing all this. This is not to say that we are eliminating jobs. It is just that the nature of the jobs would change, in the sense that the person in the past who is handling the document, instead of doing all the manual typing themselves, the manual submission themselves, they will probably be the governor of the process.
You still need the domain expert to guide that.
Correct. You still need domain expert. The domain expert is there to govern the process, making sure that the AI is not making any mistake, making sure that it is going through smoothly. There's no, obviously, the most common issue is typo, right? No typo. So the people is still there, but instead of all this process being manual, the operator becomes a governor of sorts to do that process. So that's one thing that we are looking at very deeply this year, so that we can better streamline our whole processes as well as our workforce. That's the first part. The second thing we are looking at is really to get into self-sufficiency when it comes to AI. For Carro, actually, we have a wealth of data points throughout the years that we have been operating. As mentioned at the very beginning, we always have AI tools in Carro, right? We have AI actions, we have AI pricing, etc. So we actually also reside on labeled data that we have accumulated over the years. What is very interesting, especially also with DeepSeek's paper, right, white paper in January, we're also experimenting to see how can we take this data that we have and train them into smaller models in which we could deploy, especially offline, to our agents on the ground to get things done. Whether is it on the inspection front or whether it's in the customer service front, we are doing some experiments in this front to develop highly specific domain and use case specific models to solve the problems that we have. So that's something that's coming out in Carro in 2025.
Yeah, no, I think it's quite interesting that from experimenting and looking at what kind of technologies would work for Carro, it's shifted to how then can you build the right technologies for Carro's like specific functions and trying to build your own small models. I think one thing that our audience would definitely be interested in is after all of these experiments and all these kind of efforts that you try to do to implement Gen AI and see how it can be valuable for your organization. At the end of the day, it's all about ROI and how you communicate that to stakeholders, and especially for those who are like middle management, how do you communicate that to your higher ups? So how did you approach it? How did you think about ROI and communicate it to the organization?
So I think there are two parts, right? One is to the business stakeholders, the management, the board, what Gen AI actually brings to them. And two is what's the value of Gen AI that brings to our working level people, ROI on both sides. So probably to first address the management point of view, I think after rolling out Gen AI, there's a few other solutions that we have that I didn't mention earlier, such as our ticket QA bot. We actually audit all our communications in Carro, our agents' communication with the customer, to make sure that they do not say the wrong thing or perform the wrong action with the customer. The ROI that we get at the end of the day from a business standpoint is much better conversion rates. Much better conversion rate because we can identify problems early. We can take preemptive actions to train our agents that's making all the mistakes. We can do service recovery in a sense. If there is a problem that our agent has generated for a customer, we can do quick service recovery for the agent. At the end of the day, with the same spend that we have in marketing to acquire customers, I'm getting almost double in terms of the conversion rate. And it's all down to governance, down to people management, down to mindset shift. Do I actually need Gen AI to be 100% accurate in this case? Do I need Gen AI to have guardrails because they may say the wrong thing to the customer? I don't need that because it's internal facing. It is about changing people's behavior, changing manage the company. With that, we have seen that kind of improvement in terms of results. And of course, I mentioned just now about our time savings, the RAG workflows. We are saving easily 2,000 man hours per month, right? With just a few hours of work from an engineer's perspective. So that's pretty much how we measure the ROI from a management standpoint. And these are numbers that I can call out and say, this is what we have already done in the last one. And I think on the people front, it's all ROI. It is about how can I help them to minimize the mistake at their work. For most companies, right, when you make mistakes at work, you get penalized. Garbage in, garbage out. Going back to that point earlier, right? Whatever input into the ERP, if the input is wrong, then naturally the rest of the process will get wrong and there could be a financial impact on the company. So as per any company, we are also very strict and disciplined in terms of data cleanliness and making sure that our team members are on the ball. With Gen AI, right, with the workflows I mentioned to you earlier, we are able to help them reduce their error rates. To be spending so much time, or rather their eye fatigue, which is true, the eye fatigue to eyeball every single thing and make sure that they do the right data entry. All these things get automated so that they can focus on the real value creation in their job. That's the ROI that we bring to the team for them so that they are able to do their work better and more effectively, which in turn help them to get whatever incentive that they get from their productivity, right? The outputs that they have.
I read the word that you used earlier, governance, like individual kind of workers having governance over kind of their workflow. And I think in a pre-AI, there's a lot of factors outside of your control that might impact your own kind of results and accuracy, even as you mentioned. But I guess with more kind of automated workflows and Gen AI, you can have, I guess, greater ownership, right, over these workflows.
Yeah, on that note, there's a lot more we could talk about, but I think we've run out the hour. And yeah, thanks again for coming on call with us and sharing at least, even in the hour, I think we've covered a lot, different kind of use cases that you've shared and kind of different principles also that hopefully our listeners will be able to take home and also use in their own organizations to rethink how to look at AI and Gen AI. I'll leave his LinkedIn in the description in case you guys want to follow. In the meantime, thanks again for joining us on call, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.